Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chapter 14, Lesson 4 on male and female feedback loops. I'm thinking you will find this pretty simple since we have recently covered so many feedback loops that I think you will find that these are very familiar. This is a slide on all of our chapter on what happens with the male and female. So instead of walking through this chart, I would rather show you the feedback loops themselves and talk about them there. So we know that gonadotropin releasing hormone is something that is secreted at puberty, which is going to start the sex hormone production, and that will start the development of the primary and secondary sex characteristics and the increased function of the sex organs so that we start seeing egg production and sperm production, which says development of gametes, sperm and egg, and release of sex hormones, namely estrogen and progesterone in males and testosterone in females. This is a photo of the chromosomes in every cell of the human body. And as you can see, there's 23 pairs. And that's because 23 of them came from mom and 23 of them came from dad. So you got a number 1 from mom and you got a number 1 from dad. And the same thing again. Dad's number 2 and mom's number 2. So in the sperm, you'll have 23, egg, you'll have 23. And depending on what the 23rd one is, will determine whether it ends up a female, because if both of the sperm and egg gave an X chromosome for the sex chromosome, it will be a girl. And if, in this case, if one of the gametes gave an X for the 23rd chromosome and one gave a Y, then we would have a boy resulting. So this is just showing you a karyotype or photo of the 23 pairs of chromosomes found in every body cell. In a sperm or egg, you would only have one of each. Alrighty, the male feedback loop, you'll see that we do start with hypothalamus making gonadotropin releasing hormone. It's just another RH, another releasing hormone that goes to the anterior pituitary, and the anterior pituitary releases follicle stimulating hormone. Think of the word follicle, in order for sperm production to happen. And incidentally, follicle stimulating in females is for egg production. So the word follicle stimulating will make you think about gametes. The anterior pituitary releases LH in order to cause those interstitial cells to produce their hormone testosterone, which I mentioned on an earlier lesson. This is a pretty simple feedback loop. If you can remember that the posterior pituitary was only for production of oxytocin and ADH, then remember that there were a whole list of hormones coming from the anterior pituitary, but for our topic, we'll just talk about how LH and FSH are affecting the male. And in the female feedback loop, it will be about how LH and FSH affect the female, targeting the ovary. In the male, the LH and FSH are targeting the testes, because in those seminiferous tubules, FSH is causing that spermatogenesis of sperm development, and LH is causing those interstitial cells of the testes to make testosterone. That, my friends, is the simple male feedback loop, and the notes just walk through that whole feedback loop with you, remembering that there's a negative feedback going to both parts of the brain, the pituitary and the hypothalamus, to stop it when we have enough of formation of the products there. The only other part of this is looking at the negative side effects of taking the synthetic testosterone in males. We see that the problems in men are this brown color here, less sperm count, for example, and breast development and enlarged prostate, shrinkage of testes. And the reason that is because if too many synthetic testosterone molecules are floating around, then the body is saying, well, then I don't need to make any, and there's a negative feedback, and eventually the testes are not being used because for sperm production if the person is taking synthetic testosterone, also known as steroids. So that's why we get these side effects of testes shrinkage and less sperm count. Now, for women, you can see in this box here that the problems then, if she takes synthetic hormones, she could get things like male characteristics because they will be similar as, taking testosterone for her. So she would get like facial hair, body hair, deeper voice. So these effects of taking these steroids is quite understandable when you know what those hormones actually do to the reproductive system. Now, in the white section, it shows you what kinds of things are happening with other body organs when there's such a high amount of unnatural amount of hormones. So things like strokes that are affecting the brain, and high blood pressure and aggression and impotence and liver damage. Alrighty. That is pretty much it for the male feedback loop. If you have a drop in the amount of testosterone in older men, that's called andropause. We know that in women, that's called menopause. For the female feedback loop, we'll do this one quickly, and then the next lesson will go right through the whole female cycle, which is this picture right here. But for right now, you just need to know that in women, hormones fluctuate in a 28-day cycle on average. So we have this graph that profiles 28 days, but it's not necessarily that every girl is exactly going to follow 28-day cycle. They may be irregular every month. They may have a 29-day cycle, 25-day cycle, maybe 30-day cycle, and maybe they regularly have that same cycle. Maybe their cycle changes because of different foods, different traveling, different emotional states, illnesses, all kinds of possibilities exist. And so because your cycle is not exactly this many days does not mean that there's anything wrong. It may just mean that that's the way your hormones are functioning at that time. And sometimes there's times when it's very regular and sometimes not regular. So I once knew someone who traveled for a year and never had one cycle, and it was just because of all the differences in the daily routine, and maybe temperatures, pressure, could be food, could be all sorts of things that cause that to happen. All right, so with the female hormones, gonadotropin releasing hormone is again the one coming from the hypothalamus, same as males, and GnRH is affecting the anterior pituitary, same as males, and we have LH and FSH secreted from there because of GnRH, same as males. So this part is up to here, the same in males and females. So what we do want to look at next is what the effect of those are. Now, FSH, remember, in males was causing sperm production. So it's probably something you're already anticipating, that in females, FSH is causing the egg production. So in males, this is called spermatogenesis. In females, this is called oogenesis. So this egg develops, the egg ovulates, is released from the ovary, and then the leftover follicular cells stay around. And the reason is because those follicular cells, the follicle cells around the egg, are actually producing hormones. So if you're looking at, just get another color here for you. If you're looking at the follicular cells before ovulation, they mostly make the hormone estrogen. And that estrogen is going to affect the lining of the uterus in preparation for a possible pregnancy. After ovulation happens, which is the egg released from the ovary, what happens then is our leftover follicular cells are going to mostly make progesterone. And that progesterone is going to maintain the endometrium of the uterus, and that is to make sure that the uterus is able to nourish and feed and provide oxygen and nutrients to a developing baby. So at the bottom of this feedback loop, you can see that our lines aren't completely connected, but we're going to connect this. In the beginning of the female cycle, follicle stimulating hormone is growing that egg, oogenesis, and the follicular cells, we'll just connect this line, are making mostly estrogen. The luteinizing hormone, the LH, affects the corpus luteum, the leftover follicular cells. Egg is gone, but it's the leftover cells, and those follicular cells are making progesterone, mostly progesterone. This is it for your female cycle. I'm going to have you think about this one, sketch it out for yourself. FSH, which affects the follicle, causing it to make estrogen. LH, that affects the corpus luteum. That's the word L comes from luteum, causing it to make progesterone. And this part of the notes, I will talk about the uterine cycle in our next lesson. But I'm just going to finish up to say that the fertilization process is going to happen like, if it's going to happen, it'll happen like halfway through the female cycle. And just start thinking about when you're looking at hormone levels here. Our FSH is highest at the beginning of a female cycle because it's then when follicle stimulating hormone is causing that egg to start being produced. So it's starting development at the beginning of our 28-day cycle. The egg is released at halfway through the 28-day cycle, so day 14. And the corpus luteum sticks around until it knows whether there's a pregnancy or not, so it can keep making progesterone just in case there is a pregnancy. So I think that that is enough to sort of get you thinking about the two feedback loops, draw those, add them to your collection. And we will get back to our next lesson looking at how all the parts of this uterine cycle fit together. So till next time, bye.